Hello students, we are going to begin chapter 7, which is called A More Perfect Union. This is our lead into the U.S. Constitution unit. We are going to start to get some groundwork for our information about the U.S. Constitution and government. So we are going to look at lesson 1, the Articles of Confederation and the making of a republic under state constitutions. So I am going to begin to read. Our first question says, what did the Second Continental Congress ask states to do in 1776? So yours actually says Continental Congress. Mine, I just abbreviated CC so that I saved a little bit of space here. So I'm going to read under state constitutions. The Continental Congress took up this last question even before declaring independence. In May 1776, Congress asked the states to organize their governments. Each state adopted a state constitution or plan of government. 8 states had drafted constitutions before the end of the year. New York and Georgia followed in 1777 and Massachusetts in 1780. Connecticut and Rhode Island decided to use their colonial charters as state constitutions. So, what did the Second Continental Congress ask the states to do in 1776? And that is here. They asked the states to organize their governments. So our next one, we're looking for the question. And so it says a document with a plan of government that sets up laws and principles of government. And we only have a piece of that information in that paragraph that I just read to you. And so it talks about that each state adopted a state constitution or plan of government. And that's what it talks about here, a document with a plan of government. And then I just gave a little bit more specific information about this. So our question should be about this constitution. This is the definition of a constitution, a document with a plan of government that sets up laws and principles of government. So we're defining constitution. So that's we'll call it a question, to define constitution. Next, we're going to limits on power and why were Americans being cautious. So I will again read. After years of British rule, Americans were determined not to place too much power in the hands of one ruler or body. They crafted constitutions that limited the power of the governor. Pennsylvania's constitution replaced the office entirely with an elected 12-person council. States also divided power between the governor or council and the legislature. Most states set up 2-house or bicameral legislatures to divide the work of government even further. So why were Americans being cautious? It tells us here, after years of British rule, and I've said this before, and a lot of the things that they put forth in the new country, in the United States of America, they are doing it because they are afraid of things going back to the way that they were under British rule. So they were being cautious because they did not want to place too much power in the hands of one ruler. And so what they did was adopt constitutions that limited the powers of the governor. So how did the states divide the power? Actually, I'm going to move this over a little bit more there. There we go. Okay, so they limited the power of the governor, is what it was said in the last one. And then it went on here in that next paragraph that they also divided the power between the governor and the legislature. So between governor and legislature is our answer. And then legislature, we've actually already defined this earlier in our units that we've had, but it doesn't specifically tell us what a legislature is right here. And it's important that you understand. So we need to make sure that we include it here again, that a legislature is a group of representatives that makes laws. So I'm going to leave that there for a moment and I will continue on. This next question that will be on the next slide says, what were voting requirements in most states at this time? So even when we started first talking about colonies, their group of people that were allowed to vote were pretty narrow. And as each colony was created, they started to open up voting rights a little bit more and a little bit more. So we're going to continue to see a little bit more as we move forward, but not a whole lot more yet. Okay, so this says, again, in most states, what were the voting requirements? So I will continue to read. The first state constitutions aim to keep power in the hands of the people. For example, voters chose the state legislatures and the states held elections often. In most states, only white males who were at least 21 years old could vote. These men also had to own a certain amount of property or pay a certain amount of taxes. Some states allowed free African American males to vote. Okay, so voting requirements. The first one here, actually, I'm just going to highlight all of them. Okay, so our first one is that they had to be a white male. And I know technically those are two separate things, but we're going to combine them together. They had to be a white male in order to vote. They needed to be 21 years old or older. And then the third requirement, they kind of had an option here. They either had to pay a certain amount of taxes or they had to own property. Now that last sentence says some states allowed free African American males to vote. We're not going to include that yet because only a few did that. And the rest, most of the rest, had these three requirements. So when I ask you this question later, you will have to tell me white male, you'll have to tell me 21 years old, but then you would choose, you would either say they have to pay a certain amount of taxes, or you could say they had to own property. You would tell me just one of those if I said, what are three voting requirements? But notice that both of those things, that last one that has two things in it, paying a certain amount of taxes or owning property, both would imply that these men are wealthy. So we still are giving all of the decisions to our wealthy white males. They're the ones who are making the decisions. Women are still not making decisions, and African Americans are not making decisions. Going to move forward to a new republic, and we're going to define republic. So I will read. In addition to forming state governments, the American people had to form a national government. People agreed the new country should be a republic, a government in which citizens rule through elected representatives. They could not agree, however, on what the powers of the new republic government should be. At first, most Americans wanted a weak central government. They expected each state would remain free to act independently on most issues. The states would rely on a central government only to wage war and handle relations with other countries. So a republic, this is the type of government that we have in the United States. It's a representative democracy. Is another word or a term that you could use for this. So the type of government where citizens rule by electing representatives to make decisions for them. Okay, and I'm going to add in here they're also known as a representative democracy. And last year in social studies, you learned about the different types of governments that there are in the world. Made that a little bit smaller now. Hold on. Okay, there we go. I think I made it a little bit better now. And a republic is also known as a representative democracy. Okay, and then our next heading is Articles of Confederation. And what was America's first constitution? Well, I'm going to answer this before we even start reading. It's the title of this section here. It was called the Articles of Confederation. So in the Articles of Confederation, it's going to lay out the plan of government. This is the Constitution. Now, this is not going to last super long. It will be replaced with what we have now, the U.S. Constitution. And they're going to find that there are lots of things that were wrong with this first Constitution. And so they decided to fix it and rename it, rewrite it and rename it, actually. So the first thing that we're looking for are powers that Congress have according to the Articles of Confederation. So I will read. In 1776, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to draw up a plan for a new central government. The result of this committee's work was the Articles of Confederation. After much discussion, Congress adopted the Articles, the nation's first constitution, in November of 1777. The Articles of Confederation established a weak central government. The states kept most of their power. For the states, the Articles of Confederation were a firm league of friendship in which each state retained its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, which is what they wanted all along. They wanted to still be able to make their own decisions. They didn't want a strong national government, which is what some people are going to be pushing for, in which you'll find out we actually do need a strong national government. Okay, and let's see here. So the Articles of Confederation gave Congress limited powers. So here's where we're going to be looking for our answers here. Congress could conduct foreign affairs. They could maintain the armed forces, borrow money, and issue currency. Congress did not have the power to regulate trade, force citizens to join the army, or impose taxes. If Congress needed to raise money or troops, it had to ask the states. States were not required to contribute. So the Articles of Confederation gave Congress limited powers, and then it lists them out here, the things that they could do. And they could conduct foreign affairs. They could borrow money. They could issue money, or currency is what it says there in the text, but that's what currency is money. And they would maintain the armed forces is what it says there, but I just switched it to maintain the military, which also means that they will have the power to declare war. Now that part's not in the text, but this is one that's important that I'm going to ask you about kind of regularly. So it's important that you know that Congress has that power to declare war. So in that same paragraph, it gives us more information about Congress. And we're going to look for the question here. So our answer is could not regulate trade, force citizens to join the army, give taxes, which means they could not set them or collect them, and they could not force states to carry out laws. So here, that's where we got that answer from. They could not regulate trade, force citizens to join the army, give taxes, or force states to carry out laws. Again, that part is not in the text. That's an added part that I gave you there. And so what should our question look like? Again, look at all that we have here. We're talking about Who could not do these things? Congress, right? So our question is going to be, we could do this in a couple different ways. Actually, we could write this question differently. Just like I always say, that doesn't have to be exactly the same. So we're going to talk about restrictions. What were restrictions of Congress according to the Articles of Confederation? And so restrictions mean things that they cannot do. And so that's why over here it says they could not. So 4 restrictions that Congress had. And of course, this one in red is the 4th one. So let's see here. The next question are, what were 2 things the Articles of Confederation did not have? And it specifies weaknesses. So that's something that it's going to be talking about here in the text. So I am going to continue to read 2 things the Articles of Confederation did not have. And so here, the new central government had no chief executive. This is an official such as a president or governor who carries out the laws and leads the government in its day-to-day operations. Under the Articles of Confederation, government carried on its business such as selling Western lands through congressional committees. So there's one of our answers. There was no chief executive, okay? But as stated in the sentence directly after that, we're talking about a president. So that's actually what we're going to put there. We want to put it in the terms that we're going to frequently use. So there was no president in the Articles of Confederation. And again, that goes back to the whole idea that they did not want just one or a few people to have power over all of the states. Then all the states had to approve the articles and amendments, yet not every state supported the Articles of Confederation at first. Under the new plan, each state had 1 vote regardless of population. States with large populations believe they should have more votes. So this is giving us the answers to the second part of number 4, and it's also going to give us number 5. So there was no president, and not every state supported the Articles of Confederation. And AOC is for Articles of Confederation. So once again, if you are not going to know what AOC means later on when you go back to your notes, then make sure that you type out Articles of Confederation. And so then how many votes did each state get in the Articles of Confederation? It says under the new plan, each state had 1 vote regardless of population. So 1, no matter its population, which is going to prove to be a problem. As you can see, they already started to say that states with larger populations thought they should have more than 1 vote. Okay, and then we're looking at the Confederation government, and we're looking at 4 more weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So we've already spent some time talking about things that were wrong with the Articles of Confederation, and we're going to still add more things that are wrong with the Articles of Confederation. So 4 more things. The next several years were critical ones for the young republic. It soon became clear that the new national government was too weak to handle the problems facing the United States. The weak Congress could not pass laws unless 9 states voted in favor of it. Changing the articles required the approval of all 13 states. This made it hard for Congress to pass a law when they were in any disagreement. Even with these challenges, the new government managed to manage some key achievements. Under the Articles of Confederation, Americans negotiated a peace treaty with Britain and expanded the country's foreign trade. The Confederation also helped with settling and governing the country's western lands. So 4 more weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Here we go. The new national government was too weak. And so that was one that I mentioned before was going to prove to be a problem, that we needed to have a strong national government. So another weakness is that there was a weak national government. So the NATL and GOV apostrophe T is national government. So again, I will use these abbreviations a lot in the notes because it just is easier for me to make a quick note. But if you are not going to know that national government is NAT apostrophe L GOV apostrophe T, then write out national government. So another weakness of the Articles of Confederation is that there was a weak Congress. And we're going to specifically add that it had limited authority, which is definitely going to be a problem. Those restrictions that we talked about on the previous slide are going to be some major problems we need our Congress to be able to do. Next one, they could not pass a law unless 9 states approved it. And remember, at this point, there are still only 13 states. So 9 out of 13 states were needed to approve any action. And then changing the Articles of Confederation required the approval of all 13 states. So to approve anything or put it into place, 9 states had to approve it. To change anything, 13 states had to approve it. So think about that. If they put a law into place that then turned out to be not such a great law, it was going to be very difficult for that to be changed because everybody would have to agree. And I think you all know it's very rare in life when everyone in a specific group agrees on something. And then our last one here is not in the text, but it's super important. I don't know why they don't include it here in the text, but that is they did not create a federal system of courts to settle disputes. So this was definitely going to be a problem that they wouldn't be able to fix things or make decisions about things that concerned all of the states together. They had systems of courts within each state, but not a federal system of courts. So federal system of courts, again, means that it would have control or it would settle disputes within every single state. So our next one is policies for Western lands. And our question is, what was left out of the Articles of Confederation regarding Western land? So I will begin. The Articles of Confederation did not propose a way to add new states to the United States, yet there were settlers living west of the Appalachian Mountains outside the existing states. These Western settlers wanted to organize their lands as states and join the Union. Under the terms of the Treaty of Paris, the British gave up control of the land north of the Ohio River and west of the Appalachian Mountains. Many Americans were eager to settle in this region. The new United States government had to establish policies for settlement of these Western lands. Another challenge was to come up with an orderly process by which new territories could achieve the status of statehood. So I'll kind of explain that here in a second, but the very first thing that it says here is that they did not propose a way to add new states to the country. Now, this has been an area of land that's belonged to the United States since after the French and Indian War. They expanded their boundaries from the Appalachian Mountains all the way to the Mississippi River, but they have not organized into official territories or have not become official states. We still only have those 13 states. People do live west of the Appalachian Mountains, nearer to the Mississippi River, and they want to start to organize their settlements and they want to apply for statehood. They talk about joining the Union. The Union is the United States. It's part of why we're called the United States. We're together as one country. So they want to create a state to add to the 13 states that already exist. Okay, I think that here is going to be a good place for us to pause. And we will continue on in this section of notes, or this lesson of notes, next time. So this is just our part 1. You are not going to submit this yet. We will continue to move forward next time.